Today, I am delighted to be interviewing Dr. Francisco Castillo. He is the current Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer at Maynilad Water Services. In 2013, he was named Outstanding ASEAN CIO by IDG, and in 2016 was voted Best ASEAN CIO during the ASEAN IT Strategy Forum in Singapore. Aside from his CIO role, he is also the author of a book, Managing Information Technology, which covers as a leader how you put your arms around IT and then drive it to success to meet the business and corporate goals. This book clearly separates strategy from day-to-day operations and projects from operations, the two most important functions of a CIO. So let's get underway and hear Dr. Francisco's thought process and insights. Hi, Francisco.
Hi, Emma. Thank you for that introduction.
You're welcome. Francisco, please can I ask you to share with us a short overview of your background and the reason behind writing your book, Managing Information Technology?
Previous to my current role, I worked in the IT consulting business. So I was there over a dozen years, taking many roles in the regional level. And when I was offered this opportunity and I accepted, the first question I had is really, how do I set up this whole IT organization? Because that was the role that was given to me. It wasn't operating optimally, and I had to do that. And even though I had a lot of experience in running projects from a consulting standpoint, setting up something basically from scratch was something new. So I went out and looked for standards. I looked for books that could help me in this endeavor. And much to my surprise, although there are not a lot, but there are some high-level standards, I couldn't find anything really at a practical level. And it's all about how do I manage technology? There's a lot of books about technology, specific technology, but surprisingly, even while technology is touching everything we do today, there is really very little that is written about how to manage it properly. And that was really the incentive. I learned really from the pains. So I said, why not write something that could help others in terms of making it easier for them? And that was the whole idea.
Absolutely. I'm sure people will hugely benefit from it. So within the book, you described that there are two different interdependent components of IT that are important to a CIO: strategy, which is long-term, and tactical and operational concerns, which are short-term. Please, can you share with us why this is so important to the current CIO?
Both are important, obviously, right? Because operations, it's more tactical. You're expected to keep the lights running, the lights on, right? Nothing should go down, nothing should go wrong, right? If you can't do that, then you can't even think about strategy. But projects are more strategic because these are new initiatives that you want to put into the company, right? And over all these is actually what I call portfolio. You are actually the manager of a portfolio, which covers many different projects that you're initiating, as well as operations. And that portfolio of projects and operations needs to be aligned with the direction of the company, meaning to say the core business. You may be doing a lot of work, but if what you're doing is not aligned to what the business wants, it's really of very little value. And it changes. It's not static. It changes all the time. I mean, probably 6 months ago, most companies were thinking of how to increase market share, revenue growth. And where are we today? Probably most are thinking about cash flows, preservation of cash, right? So what 6 months ago was valid is no longer valid today. And as a CIO or as a technology manager, one needs to be aware and realign the portfolio to be able to meet that strategy. The biggest challenge really is that how do I allocate resources? And on one hand, you have financial resources, which we all know are limited, but even more important are human resources. In today's knowledge economy, you only have a limited number of people that you need to assign them to do certain things. So you need to focus on what is really important. And as things change, you need to rebalance, right? So that you're actually, again, aligned to what the business wants. So that's the whole trick of the trade, if you want, right? How do I get these things right?
Absolutely. And I think that people piece at the moment is even ever so more important as well. So can you explain an example of best industry standards and their practical implementation, highlighting the differences between the methodologies used in projects and those used in operations?
In operations, there's a very good standard, which is IT service management, or ITSM. And for projects, there's a whole set of guidelines by the Project Management Institute, which are applicable no matter what domain, not only IT. These, I think, are fundamentals. Now, the key is how to implement these, right? And one very important aspect, which I see many companies committing a mistake, is to separate operations from projects, meaning to say the personnel handling operations should be distinct from that handling projects. Now, why is that so? You may have a person that is very knowledgeable in a particular technology, which is both present in your day-to-day operations and in the project, but he can't be doing both. So, case in point, operations basically is handling tickets. It's accepting requests and incidences and fixing them and turning it around as fast as possible. Projects, it has a timeline, it has a plan, right? So you can't expect the same person to be doing both, right? Handling an incident and then going back to the project, because it's a totally different mindset, right? If you do that, then you get the guy really is not able to focus, and he's probably going to do both things wrong, right? So that's very important. It's important to have the correct table of organization. Everything starts for me with that. And then secondly, those standards that make these two work together.
In the book, you dedicate a chapter to the cutover of projects into operations, which is a critical aspect seldom discussed in detail. Can you please share with us an example of this?
Actually, as I mentioned, you have a project. Normally, a project may be either contracted out to a third party or also done in a mixed way with some in-house people. And then you have operations. So these are distinct groups. So when the project is about to finish, right, and you go live, then it's transferred to operations. So imagine this scenario. Operations that has no idea about this project suddenly has to handle it. So it's a very critical moment in any technology project, especially more so because technology is really an intangible. Right? It's not like saying, okay, I get this car and now it's yours. So because it's an intangible, it's powerful, and yet there's a huge risk in that particular process. That's what I call the cut over into operations. So that chapter actually talks about how to minimize the risk and the possible downside of having of that phase, that cut over phase. Just to give you an idea, right? There are things that can be done in order to minimize the risk. For example, training the operations people on the project, the technology in the project, and the processes of the project before it gets to them. It has to be done at the right moment. If you do it too early, then they'll forget because they're not using it. If you do it too soon, right, then it's too fast, right? So they have to be trained. Another aspect is coming up with an FAQ for a service desk so that if they get a question or they get an incident, they actually can respond. And if they can't, who exactly do they escalate to, right? Because they need to know who to escalate to so that the idle time is minimized. Once the ticket comes to the first level support, which I recommend should be operations, right? They actually try to fix it. And if they cannot, then they go to the second level support, which is the project team. That way, the operations team is already getting exposed and trying to fix things. The best time to learn is when you have incidences, actually. And that's why the operations people should be handling those incidences as early as possible so that they learn and then things go smooth later on.
Thank you. And that leads nicely into our next question, Francisco. Management of projects is always a key topic to any CIO. What is your opinion of an Agile project methodology, and how does it differ from the Waterfall methodology? And when is it convenient to apply each?
Agile is a buzzword nowadays, right? I mean, everybody says, I do Agile, right? Unfortunately, or I don't know if it's fortunately or, but the reality is that it's really the name. It's very appealing, Agile, right? But it doesn't mean that because you're doing Agile methodology, you really have an Agile organization, right? I think there's a confusion there. It's just a different methodology on how to handle projects from the traditional or the more traditional waterfall. Now, which projects are good for Agile? Which projects are good for waterfall? So if you look at the Agile methodology, it requires a lot of interaction with the end users. So they need to be involved every day or at least every week in terms of prototyping and giving feedback. Another aspect is that they should be readily giving feedback in terms of the prototype so that the changes can be made. So if you look at that, right, it really boils down to certain projects where it's easy to give feedback, right? Anything that is very visual, for example, is a good candidate. Anything that is in the back end and it's hidden is more difficult to adopt an Agile methodology. For example, if you have a background process that cuts across 6 departments, I think it's easier to get to come up with a design by talking to all 6 departments and coming up with that and then undertaking the development rather than doing it iteratively. Right? Another area where Agile can be very much applied is in coding, in development work, right? Because you have quite a free hand and you can actually change things pretty rapidly, right? So it really has its niche, right? Both of them, right? And there are also hybrids. But it doesn't mean that because you use one methodology, it's superior to another.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it also goes to getting those stakeholders on board as early as you possibly can as well. So
very important.
Yeah.
You can't get them on board. I don't know how.
Exactly. So with all your extensive experience, what's the one key aspect that you would like to share with your peers on how to manage information technology?
In a way, I go back to the first question, right? Which is why I wrote this book. And my advice is with the pandemic and even in normal times, is don't lose focus on good technology management practices. And I say technology management because I think technology is managed in a very different way from other general management aspects. It has its own particularities, which are very different, right? So even though the environment, we may be in a pandemic, or the technology changes, the way to manage it does not so much, right? In the last 25 years, I think the newest thing that has come about is Agile, but the rest is basically the same. And that's why it's sometimes a danger that when there's a new technology that comes up, people tend to throw out the old. They say, oh, now it's cloud or now it's IoT, right? No, you should manage it exactly the same way, right? That hasn't changed. The technology may change, but the management of it, I would say, has not changed so much. And that's my advice.